This is the most studied frame of Lost. It was published just hours after the episode was aired in Entertainment Weekly. With a breakdown of many clues, it became subject of endless discussions, and to me, it is the epitome of the hardcore Lost fandom, a tremendous puzzle in the Lost mythology, where most of it has very little to say about the grand picture of the show, but nearly all of it can be pieced together by us.
For me, it's a great example of how the producers are designing narrative experiences for viewers, not just to sort of be immersed in the story, but give them little puzzles and games to play with.
In this analysis, I'll break it down in the following. Chapter 1, Intro, Radzinsky's mental health. Chapter 2, explaining the abbreviations. Chapter 3, the station's locations on the map, which includes the Swan, the Looking Glass, Tempest, the Pearl, the Staff, the Orchid, the Arrow, the Barracks, the Flame, the Meteorology Station, and the Hydra, as well as the Black Rock and the Pala Ferry Dock. Then I'll go underground and reveal the locations of the Cerberus vents, and in the final chapter, the tunnels. This map was started by Stuart Radzinsky, and then continued on by Kelvin Inman. Seeing as how paranoid Radzinsky was in Season 5, we can deduce that he made the map so secretive that no intruders would stumble upon it, in case the station was raided by the hostiles. He even noted down that he was suspicious of Kelvin. We heard of Radzinsky in Season 2.
Yeah, you should have seen Radzinsky do this. He had a photographic memory. I mean, this whole baby was his idea.
And didn't see him until Season 5. In Season 5, we'll learn that Radzinsky knew a lot. More than what is written down on the map. One explanation of this is that the proximity and duration in the Swan broke him down, losing his memory like Daniel Faraday and becoming depressed, starting to ramble down stuff, even trying to cross out stuff and erase things like the notations up here. Some notations are in Latin, and they are quite depressing. More reasons to start making a map, trying to recollect his memories of the Dharma Initiative. Another reason is that the direction of the show changed a bit when they finally got a deal to end the show.
Yes, based on Radzinsky's travels, that is an incredibly accurate map.
You know, there are certain things that exist that were part of the Dharma Initiative that Radzinsky did not know about.
You know, in the middle of Radzinsky's map, there's a question mark station, and he didn't know what it was, and we now know that that is the Pearl Station.
So Radzinsky, at the time of the writing of this episode, was just a Dharma member that walked all over the island trying to learn about the stations, rather than the head of research that designed the Swan station. This was even confirmed by the Lost writer Javier Guillermo in an interview on an online chat on the Comics Review on March 28, 2006. First of all, I'd like to give a shout out to bmetcalf82 on Lostpedia, who wrote a terrific analysis of it back in 2009. I'll be citing some of it in my analysis. There's a second layer to the blast door map that can be seen in different lighting conditions. It was seen on the Lost video game, but it has been deemed canon.
Although I would say that there's maybe some parts of it that we haven't seen yet, because we know that under various lighting conditions, different parts of the map are visible.
Right.
So.
There are two spectrums to that map, and we've only seen one.
As well as the top layer of the blast door map, seen in detail in the Lost Jigsaw game. I will also add in some information that was revealed in the alternate reality game that came out after Season 2 called The Lost Experience. Everything you need to know about Lost can be found in the show itself, but if you want just a little extra, The Lost Experience gave some additional information about the Hansa Foundation, the company that funded the Dharma Initiative. Since there are elements of the map that got further developed in the Lost Experience, I'm gonna add in some of that. Another thing is that distance between the stations are not the same. The island is not in the shape of an octagon. The stations are arranged in sort of a pantheon that only vaguely coheres to their geographical disposition, kind of like this Crusades map of Jerusalem that is constructed into a circle, or in modern ways, subway maps. There is a lot of notations in Latin, some of them come from Roman poets. There is a possibility that some of the books in the Swan were studies of Latin that Radzinsky picked up. The hostiles did speak Latin as their secret language, so it would be useful for him if he encountered them. Some examples of Latin phrases: Sursum corda, which is lift up your hearts and is spoken at the beginning of the Eucharistic prayer. A mouse does not rely on just one hole. The phrase is an attribute to Plautius in his play Truculentus. We also get a quote from Lucan and Publius Cyrus. Another poetic phrase is I think, therefore I suffer, which is a play on the famous quote by René Descartes, Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. In the second layer, we also get aegrisomnia, which means a sick man's dream, or troubled dreams. Tempus edax rerum, which means time devours all, or time the devourer of all things. Quid est veritus, which means what or why did he fear? These suggest to me that Radzinsky really is out of it, putting out mathematical equations. He wonders if he is sick. He mentions time, which is quite cool. He might have had bad nightmares after being isolated for so long. The Latin phrases seems like quotes picked up by the books he had, or just sporadic and depressed notations and not necessarily related to the locations on the map. Therefore, I won't focus too much on them. Chapter 2. Abbreviations. Before we start with the stations, I will explain a few things on the map. Dharmatal Intranet. This is believed to be the network connecting the various stations. We've already seen glimpses of it in Season 2, and we'll see much more communications with other stations later in the show. Cerberus. The Dharma Initiative had a name for the smoke monster. They called it Cerberus, named after the three-headed dog from Greek mythology that guarded the gates of the underworld.
The three heads of Cerberus were believed to represent the past, the present, and the future. Cerberus' father was Typhon, the most feared of all of the monsters, and his mother was Echidna, the half-woman, half-snake creature, also known as the mother of all monsters.
We also have some abbreviations. First, the ones that I confirmed. Alvar Hanso. He was the man we saw in the first orientation film. He funded the Dharma Initiative. Dharma Initiative Hanso Group. We don't know much, but I think this is the high-ranking members, the ones that Alvar Hanso mentions in this orientation film that we saw in the Lost Experience.
The precise location of the facility is known only to myself, the Groots, the few high-ranking members of my organization.
Cerberus Vent. We know that a smoke monster moves above the ground, but also sneaks up from below the ground. There are vents on the island that he uses. Periodic resupply drop. The food drop we saw in this episode. Emergency escape protocol. I guess it's the tunnels, but it might be more than that. And the unconfirmed. These are my theories. Some are hard to crack. MDG. Well, this one is a head scratcher. Either MD, being Doctors of Medicine, and the G is group, or magnetic discharge grid. I also like Mittelwerk Dharma group, and Mittelwerk the Groot group, or something M the Groot, something with Mittelos, maternal death generation. Some fans think it's magnetic degaussing. My best guess is mainland Dharma group, or Michigan Dharma group, and I will talk more about it later in the video. Rev, well, not sure, but I think it might be short for revision, so that the one writing it might come back and correct something on the map. RVS, remote viewing station, and H, hidden room. Now to the fun part. Let's break down the stations. We'll do it clockwise, starting from the bottom. Chapter 3. The Swan. First of all, let's try to see how much the map matches the island map I've made, and we can begin with the Swan. It fits nicely. What we know from the show is that they started to construct the Swan station in the late 70s. The incident happened in July 1977. They might have already built tunnels, water pipes, and conduit lines from other stations to the construction area. This is supported by the multiple escape conduits blocked by incident line. They tried to study the electromagnetic fluctuations, but weren't able to do it because of the incident, so they installed the computer and a timer, so every time the energy built up, it would discharge it. In 1980, the station was finished, and we presumably had 2 new recruits. As the orientation film said, I'm even gonna come up with a date when the first 2 recruits began. Day 1, January 19th, 1980. 2 new recruits arrive at the station. They get their vaccine there, as well as watch the orientation film, likely assisted by someone else giving them instructions about the number sequence, as well as the snowman riddle.
What did one snowman say to the other snowman?
These 2 recruits would be there for the next 540 days. Why January 19th? Well, 540 days from now leads us to a specific date that is mentioned underneath the Swan on the map. It is day 540, July 12th, 1981. The DIHG, known as the Dharma Initiative Hanso Group, come to the Swan for inspection. We haven't heard of them on the island, only from the blaster map, so it seems like this is a part of a group with very important people, as well as the man who funded it all, Alvar Hanso, kinda like the board of directors, along with the project manager of the station, Stuart Radzinsky, and the creators behind the Dharma Initiative, Gerald and Karen de Groot. They probably got a report on the incident in July 1977 and was invited to the island 4 years later to see how the experiments were doing and how the test subjects had completed their 540-day mission. Seeing as Radzinsky was station leader for the Swan and had been that for many years, I think he led this inspection with the Hanso group. The 2 men would be relieved of their duties duties and replaced by another duo. And then the DIHG would travel around the island, visiting other stations, inspecting them, and probably get back to the barracks at the end of the survey. At some point, Radzinsky would take over one of the spots in the Swan. Whether or not they would rotate with one new guy every now and then, until Kelvin came, we don't know. You might ask, what's up with the hidden corridors over here? Is it related to the incident room in Los Viadomes? The incident room seen in Lost Viadomes is based on sketches and blueprints from the Swan map from season 2, at a time when the show wasn't even planned to have a big time travel story ending with the incident in season 5. And since the video game is an outside source and the incident room is already conflicting information with the show's canon, I'll put it aside and come back to it in a later video. Don't think too much about it. The Swan station was supposed to be bigger. Radzinsky even planned for it in the original blueprint, but the energy was too powerful, so the station design was like this, cutting out potential hallways here and maybe even here, who knows. I am curious about the 5 fatalities. If this was written by Kelvin, he could have counted Radzinsky as well as 4 other people that died from unknown causes, poisoned by the purge gas, monster-related death, killed in the incident, or suicide. People that Radzinsky told Kelvin about, which is why he was so paranoid.
That hostile knows about the Swan! Get some men and some guns and get your asses out here right now!
The station also confirms that food drop happens every 6 to 8 months. There are some station-wide failures of the Darmatel intranet on April 8th of 2000, August 15th of 2001, and January 6th of 2003. The last 2 happened while Desmond was there with Kelvin. I'll cover them during the season 2 finale, when we'll see them living together. The Metcalf82 on Lostpedia suggested that the shutdowns were caused by Ben and the others trying to cut off various stations from the Swan station so that they could attempt to draw the mouse out of its hole and finally find the Swan.
That him? Shepard?
Yes.
Maybe the others didn't know where the entrance of the station was. I'm not sure if I agree with that theory, but it's quite cool nonetheless. Let's move on. The next station is the Looking Glass. This one is not on the official map, but on the extra layer that was revealed in the last video game. However, the showrunners have said that this extra layer is canon to the show, so I'm gonna include it. The placement is a little bit off. Both the Looking Glass and the Hydra should be adjusted slightly to the right, like this. This notation of possible offshore data dump might be connected to the Looking Glass, since there is a cable on the beach.
And these cables, do any of them run into the ocean?
Yes, there is an underwater beacon that emits sonar pings to help guiding the vessels.
By vessels, you mean submarines?
Yes.
It also says cables running offshore.
Manual override achieved. For pallet drop, enter 2-4. For station uplink, enter 3-2. For mainland communication, enter 3-8.
The Flame. We don't know if Kelvin or Radzinsky drew this. If it was Radzinsky, then his mind was gone. That was the station he was living in. Placing alleged location number 4 right next to the Swan is no good.
I'm sensing a lack of confidence.
We've been walking for 2 days, following a compass bearing provided by the carvings on a stick.
Radzinsky might have started drawing it, and then Kelvin completed it. Kelvin being the clueless guy, or Radzinsky might have confused it with the Tempest. The Tempest is near the shore here, on the southwestern part of the island. And it also mentions underground springs and heavy water. Tempest logo, anyone? Maybe this illustration was the Tempest to begin with, and someone made a blunder. Heavy water is water that contains heavy hydrogen, also known as deuterium, in place of regular hydrogen. The presence of the heavier hydrogen isotope gives the water different nuclear properties. The US expressed an interest in using heavy water as a backup for the Manhattan Project, in case their graphite reactor design proved infeasible. In 1953, the United States began using heavy water in plutonium production reactors at a nuclear reservation. Seeing as Alva Hanso was a munitions magnate, then the Tempest seems like one of his advisors advancements, maybe even his idea, fits well with the filming location being at a real-life World War II bunker in Hawaii. One major historical event regarding heavy water happened in my home country of Norway. Norway, being a mountainous country filled with massive waterfalls, had the world's first heavy water plant. When Nazi Germany invaded Norway, Allied forces feared the Nazis would use it for their atomic bomb project.
I want to know what's so important about heavy water. I want to know, Doctor, and you're going to tell me.
Come right inside the heavy water plant at Telemark and share the agonizing suspense as these saboteurs fight for your existence.
Luckily, they were stopped. But I don't think the Dharma Initiative was going to make an atomic bomb, but might have studied heavy water here, as well as producing toxic gas. Kind of like making the Tempest into a nuclear reservation. The station being nestled in the mountains on an island filled with waterfalls could be a clue here. So I think that there is a mix-up on the blaster map, and the information and placement here is about the Tempest, while station number 4 and the flame is supposed to be up here. There's a possibility that some of the information on the top here is supposed to match the Tempest, such as this line, possible manufacturing facility with light industrial equipment. Let's move into the middle, the Pearl. Its placement is right above the Swan, and it fits quite well on the map. All those lines are likely video feeds from various stations. On the right side here we have high potential for RVS facility. I think RVS stands for remote viewing station, since we have cables going so far up north. Also fits with the capsule dump being far north.
What is this?
Hey Doc, what'd you say Saeed's signal's gonna be when the coast is clear to hit that beach party?
The Dharma Initiative did a lot of digging, but I think they also used the pre-existing tunnels too. We don't see power lines on the island, so they could have used some of the underground tunnels for it. There's a toilet here as well, so they did plumbing too. Did Dharma use some of the already existing tunnels to lay down the pipes and cables under the ground? Maybe. That seems to be a violation of the truce. Radzinsky must have completely forgotten about the Pearl station, since he made it into a giant question mark.
The Pearl was to observe other stations. The Swan was to study electromagnetism. But of course, that was before the incident.
The Swan? How could he know what we were going to name it? We haven't even built it yet.
Or maybe it started out like something else. Maybe he was starting to draw the sonic fence, the perimeter around the barracks, as yellow markers, and then forgot about it and then completed it much later when he was out of it. I have a very fanfiction idea that when Dharma came to the island for the first time, they had two places on the island they were looking to build the barracks. One being in the valley north of the Swan, and the other one was up here in the north, but I'll come back to that later. Radzinsky or Kelvin screwed it up and made the whole map around the Pearl, which is not really the most important station on the island. The staff. The placement of this station also fits the map pretty well. A bit higher up from the Pearl to the west and above the Tempest. If the H stands for hidden, then this room here might be the hidden room behind the lockers. The hidden room in the Swan could be the weird hallway that doesn't lead anywhere, or the magical extra room in the armory, or just to add in the extra rooms the Swan was supposed to have if they didn't have to install the computer. We have some interesting information here. The station is believed to have been abandoned due to the AHMDG incident of 1985. This 1985 event is mentioned above the Orchid as well. I'll get back to that. The information on the staff says that it was either abandoned due to a certain event in 1985 or a malfunction of the Cerberus system. There's a possibility that at the time of writing this episode, the smoke monster would have a more Dharma-related revelation. The blaster map suggests that Dharma had more trouble with Cerberus than with the hostiles. I mean, they are not even mentioned, only in the second layer. Anyway, since the Dharma Initiative didn't create the monster, we could alternatively read Cerberus system as the system that blocks it, such as the sonic fence around the barracks. Therefore, the staff could have been abandoned either due to the AHMDG incident of 1985 or the malfunction of the Cerberus system, aka the sonic fence, which let it inside the barracks, killing a few of the Dharma members, like the doctors that were assigned to the staff, leading to the termination of the work done in the station. Something bad happened, which is reiterated by the Latin notation underneath it. It's a bad plan that can't be changed. But what about the AHMDG incident in 1985? With that, I want to move on to the next station, which is the crossed out station over here, the Orchid.
Hello, I'm Dr. Edgar Hallerwax. This is the orientation film for Station 6 of the Dharma Initiative.
The second layer confirms this station as Station 6, the Orchid, which I happen to agree with. That also fits quite nicely with the map. It's directly above the staff, because the same Alvar Hanso MDG incident in 1985 affected this station too. What happened? Well, whatever it was, I think there was a rift within the highest ranking members of the Dharma Initiative. There's a slash between Alvar Hanso and the word MDG, maybe Mainland Dharma Group or Michigan Dharma Group. There's a pattern in Lost, and groups always divide into factions, just like the plane that was split apart.
We crash. Two halves of the same plane fall in different parts of the island. You're over there, I'm over here.
Survivors either living at the caves or the beach, either following Locke to the barracks or staying at the beach with Jack. You either time traveled to the 70s or you stayed in the present. Our heroes were in conflict with the others.
So, you're like one of them, huh?
We're the good guys.
In my experience, the people who go out of their way to tell you that the good guys are the bad guys.
Just like Dharma was in conflict with the hostiles, but within the groups were additional splits, even amongst the others. You had those that were loyal to Ben, and those that were more loyal to the island.
He sent me back here to give you a message. He wants you to know that Jacob is dead. And because he's gone, none of you have to stay here any longer. You're free.
Within Dharma, you had those that were more interested in exploring the island, learning what it could do to help mankind, and those that were interested in exploiting it. Therefore, no more Dharma Initiative Hanso group, it split up. We can already see those tensions in Season 5.
Hey, stop! Damn it, stop! That is an order. I'm still in charge here.
You were in charge, Horace. But if we're gonna protect our people and all the work we're doing here, you don't have the stomach for what happens next.
I believe that Alvar Hanso and those loyal to him split apart from dangerous experiments. In the show, we'll have Tom, one of the people loyal to Ben and the island, speak highly of Alvar Hanso while quoting him.
Tell me, you go over a man's house for the first time. Do you take off your shoes? You put your feet up on his coffee table? You walk in the kitchen and eat food that doesn't belong to you? Open the door to rooms you got no business opening? You know, somebody a whole lot smarter than anybody here once said that since the dawn of our species, man's been blessed with curiosity.
Things had gotten too far. Someone might have been killed by the smoke monster, while others still wanted to continue. Radzinsky wanted to let the Mainland Dharma Group decide whether or not they should kill Saeed.
We've got to call for a vote. Either we make a decision, or I call Ann Arbor. And they make it for us.
Maybe the Degruts were more interested in exploiting the island, like Radzinsky did. Whether or not MDG stands for Mainland Dharma Group, Michigan Dharma Group, or whatever, the heydays of the Dharma Initiative were starting to come to an end. So in 1985, when the Alvar Hansa MDG incident happened, they stopped the time travel experiments at the Orchid. If this incident affected the staff, they probably stopped trying to save the pregnant women. There was no solution. It would take many years until Ben stepped in, but that was years after Dharma was exterminated. The 1985 incident in the Orchid could also have resulted with someone turning the frozen wheel, moving the island. Maybe it was Alvar Hanso. That's just speculation, but the fact is that if we are including elements from the Lost experience, we would know that in 1985 his daughter Rachel Blake is 3 years old and she never knew her father.
That's why you came. The reason why we've investigated the Foundation. You wanted to learn more about the trust fund that paid for your upbringing. You wondered how a single mother could pay for an education and all the advantages you were given. But you are a beautifully intelligent young woman, and you were able to trace the funds back to the Foundation. You kept on because you knew the path would lead to your father.
Him being on the island, witnessing something horrible in 1985 could work into the timeline. After he left the island, winding up in Tunisia, he traveled back to Denmark to his job at the Hansa Foundation there. This 85 event might have been so chaotic that as a result of a schism within the highest ranking Dharma members, Radzinsky ended up in the Swan station from now on, pushing the button along with someone else, and he scratched out the station. I think a major disagreement had to have happened because the Hansa Foundation stopped funding the Dharma Initiative 2 years later in 1987.
This is something that we hear about on Lost, and what is your involvement with the Dharma Initiative?
Well, the Dharma Initiative was canceled in 1987. We cut off its funding. We ended that project. Yes.
So you're not involved in it?
No.
Let's go back for a bit with the Orchid. There is some notations to it that didn't fit up here, that is at the bottom here. I think that the things at the top here were written by Radzinsky, but the notations at the bottom here were written by Kelvin. Low priority zone for exploration, possible site for above ground study of flora. In other words, this is a description of the greenhouse and the study of the plant life at the top. However, the actual Orchid station was down below and study time. It also says low relevance to Valenzetti related research activity. Valenzetti related research was something we learned in the Lost experience, and it was more about preventing the end of the world.
After the Cuban Missile Crisis, both nations decided to find a solution. The result was the Valenzetti equation, commissioned under the highest secrecy through the UN Security Council. The equation is the brainchild of the Italian mathematician Enzo Valenzetti. It predicts the exact number of years and months before humanity extinguishes itself.
It was never mentioned on the show, other than this citation here. Kelvin probably traveled around the island and found this station, but he only found the greenhouse. He didn't know about the station below, so he assumed it was just a botanical research center, which had nothing more valuable than the study of plant life, therefore no relevance to Valenzetti. He would go back to the Swan to note this down on the map. The next station on the map is the Arrow.
Hello, I'm Dr. Marvin Candle, and this is the orientation film for Station 2, The Arrow.
This station is far north, but when we compare it to the map, it fits well with my map. It's the next station if we do it all clockwise. It has an extra room called H3. In my map of the Arrow, I've added a toilet, but they could be more. It's just likely an extra room that was used to be filled with weapons, desks, maps, and other stuff that has been cleared out or destroyed when the hostiles took over, similar to the extra room in the medical station. Also, all the stations have these round forms, but I think it's just a cool design choice. We know that the Arrow is not a round station. I'd say the same thing about the way they are pointing to the middle. It's a design choice by Radzinsky to emphasize that you can communicate with all stations. They're all connected, which is also why he removed the clip from the orientation film. He actively wanted to communicate with those stations, despite Marvin Candle specifically saying it was forbidden.
I repeat, do not use a computer for anything other than entering the code.
On the Blaster map, it says Arrow Station, primary function, restocking and staging area for Dharma Initiative Hansa Group. I think that when they came to the island, they came to this station to get a debrief on the hostile situation, to arm up and then travel to the various stations for inspections from the north and then all the way down to the Swan in the south, and then traveling on this side, visiting all the stations, and then get back to the barracks over here.
Here at the barracks, you will enjoy all the comforts and amenities of a modern suburban lifestyle, where you and your neighbors all play an integral role.
The barracks. This one is not visible on the ordinary map, only on the second layer from the video game. The location fits well. It's close to both the Arrow and the Flame. The second layer mentions that it is hostile controlled, so that was written after the purge. We have the sentence over here, hub of Dharma Initiative Hansa Group road system, or other major route overland travel. In season 5, we learned that the barracks has a motor pool, so I think this is what it means. This is the hub for the Dharma vans. Here we also have the sentence final destination of code 42. 2 seasons from now, we will have code 14J. I guess code 42 is another one that they use, and when it is signaled, the Dharma members have to go to the barracks. We have this sentence down here, which likely belongs up here. Possible recreational area for Dharma Initiative Hansa Group survey teams. The next station, the Flame. We're still moving clockwise. The next station is this one over here, C3. As I mentioned earlier, there was a mix-up with Kelvin and Radzinsky. This is actually the Flame, not this one. The C likely stands for compound or center, and we see Kelvin draw this station out in the season 2 finale. The Flame was unsuitable for Dharma Initiative Hansa Group, which I inferred as there was no need for them to inspect this station. There is a notation here that fits the Flame. Why so many Dharmatel relays in such an untenable location? Mikhail said that the Flame is the hub, but the location might be too close to the hostiles. Radzinsky being paranoid about them and the various shutdowns of the Dharmatel network could mean that the hostiles are cutting off the cables and sabotaging for the island communication. Down below you have sightings coincide with emergency shutdowns of intranet services, periods of heightened security. This all seems like sabotage by the hostiles and Dharma ramping up security. Down below you have a sentence that should be up here with the Flame, since I'm certain it belongs here. Interference might also prevent location use as listening station, cryptography research, communications analysis facility. Once again it is mentioned that the Flame is in a bad location, and I wholeheartedly agree. Placing a station with a satellite dish next to these mountains, but at least we learn here that the Flame was also a station where they studied cryptography, the practice and study of techniques for secure communication. In the original sketch for the blaster map, this sentence was paired with the meteorology station, but as we learned later on, the Flame is a station for communication with the outside world. The writers might have had some ideas to get to the meteorology station at some point in the show, but things change, and we never ventured into that station. The meteorology station. Remember in the orientation film, Marvin Cannell mentioned that the Dharma Initiative studied meteorology. It is mentioned on the blaster map with this: mountainous terrain most likely used by Dharma Initiative Hansa Group for meteorological research due to high altitude. Geological composition likely to cause magnetic disturbance / interference with the weather project. But we never saw the station, or did we? Yep, there it is. My theory is that this location over here is the meteorology station, and here's why. First of all, just look at this mountaintop. It's so steep. There's no roads up here. It's dense trees, and anyone would likely fall to a gruesome death. It's so high up. Imagine how it is during rainfalls. Just take a peek on Google Street View here. I doubt you can set up camp there. Second of all, Ben had the people man the various stations on the island. He had 2 people down in the looking glass, which must have been such a bore. Mikhail was at the Flame. Sometimes they had people at the medical station, the Hydra, the Pearl, and so on. I like to think that just like the looking glass, there's a couple of others on this mountaintop over here. And look at this view. This would also be a great way to spy on people, since it's an open field around this valley. For instance, did the others see Michael trek up this valley and then inform Tom, Pickett, and the rest of the others of this location, and inform them that Jack, Kate, Locke, and Sawyer are following them?
Bag him quick! His friends are right behind us.
Or earlier, did they see the tailies with the 815ers trek through the jungle and then send the twins after them? Or even earlier, did they spot Locke, Boone, Jack, and Kate trying to catch up on Ethan, which led the others to split up the trail? And third, it's not so far-fetched to put a station here, since there is a lot of these types of outposts in Hawaii. This YouTube channel highlights these old bunkers, such as this one, the Kaena Point radar station, so I can easily imagine that the station was built into the mountain with a ladder going up to the lookout point over here. Here's a sketch I made. 2 people from the others could have a mirror system set up in case they need it.
What are you doing, dude? Communicating.
The mirror system is pretty much my 4th point about the station. Dharma had a mirror system in the Swan station. If Dharma had a station with an intricate mirror system there, why not have it here? There is a notation here about suspected shutdown being on October 28, 1984. Not sure which station it refers to, but it could very well be this one. Maybe money ran out and they couldn't build more, and the blaster map mentions magnetic interference anyway. But yeah, there we have it, meteorology station. The Hydra station. We've gone the full circle now. The last station is the Hydra station. First of all, there's this notation up here that belongs to the Hydra. Intranet support for Carcharodon carcharis, Latin for Great White Shark, selective breeding facility. There's a question mark, so whoever wrote it was not sure if the intranet would reach that station. There's also this notation, Rev 4302. Possible location of zoological research facility, stated goal repatriation and deterritorialization of Ursus maritimus, Latin for polar bear, through gene therapy and extreme climate change. Definitely their cages and the Hydra station. But look at the date, 2002 is a year after Desmond came to the island, meaning that it's definitely Kelvin who wrote it and that he traveled to the Hydra island. He was still fixing the sailboat at the time, but he had that small dinghy that he probably used. So when Desmond was down in the hatch, pushing the button, Kelvin would leave the station, go through the jungle, hike to the crater area and get the dinghy out to sea, traveling up the sea up here, checking out this small island off the coast that he probably want to explore. The Rev or revision might be that he went there maybe 2 or 3 times.
Namaste. And good.
And that's it with the Dharma stations. There is also a little bit more that isn't Dharma related, but worth mentioning. The Black Rock is mentioned, as well as the death site of Captain Magnus Hanso. We will see in season 6 that he was dead on impact.
Bring me the captain.
Sir, Captain Hansen is dead.
Good God, we're in the middle of the bloody jungle.
I am still placing it over here on the map, but to emphasize a point I said in my video on Exodus, the show likely retconned the location of the Black Rock from the east to the west, because at the time they hadn't fused together the storylines for the statue and the ship. The Pala ferry dock is up here in the second layer of the map, which fits well with where I've placed it. The notation is scientists discover ferryport, shutdown. Could this mean that the dock was originally built by someone else and the Dharma Initiative just built this structure, gave it a name and used it for travels? The blaster map mentions Hic Sut Dracones, which means here be dragons. The phrase had its origin being used on old maps to indicate dangerous or unexplored territories, in imitation of a medieval practice of putting illustrations of dragons, sea monsters and other mythological creatures on uncharted areas of maps where potential dangers were thought to exist. I think it might be this area over here. There are no Dharma stations here. It's also where Rousseau resides, so it's fitting that she never knew about it.
What is this?
We were hoping you could tell us.
I've never seen anything like it.
Danielle, you once mentioned the radio tower. Is this it?
I have never been here before.
To summarize, the map looks like this. If we conclude that there is a mix-up with the Tempest and the Flame, and a slight adjustment of the offshore stations, then it works pretty well. But this is not the end, we have more. Let's go deeper, underground. Chapter 4, Cerberus Vents. We also have the Cerberus Vents, and I'm gonna pinpoint where they all are. There's 4 on the map. CV1. The mapper says that the location is unlikely, so I think it's not so close to the Swan, but rather more north, up here, above the Pearl Station, close by the Dark Territory River. We've actually seen it in the show, since John Locke was dragged into it. This same area, north of the Pearl, is also where Echo encounters the monster earlier in Season 2, but also where he will be killed by the monster in Season 3, which is why I think the CV1 is here. CV2. Destroyed/blocked due to incident. Well, the Swan was built on hostile territory, so they screwed up and likely destroyed or blocked the whole thing with the Swan Station. But that's quite fitting, isn't it? With the themes of the Swan Station, the parallels with the heart of the island, and the underworld aspect we've learned already. CV3. This one is located to the right of the Swan. Remember that hot spot I've been talking about? I think the most logical place for CV3 is here. The haunted location near the cockpit. The cabin is here and sometimes it isn't. Lots of whisperers reside here. The monster was here in White Rabbit. The monster was here in the pilot, it traveled through the jungle and went down in the vent, and later when they went to the cockpit, it has a quite fitting Latin notation, Liberate te ex inferis, which means save yourself from hell, CV4. The temple of the 4 Cerberus vents, this one is the largest one on the map, and it's nestled up here near the flame and the barracks, but north of the meteorology station. And this one is also quite obvious. Underneath the temple we see this massive chamber with this cool mural and the vents over here. We don't know if Radzinsky went inside the temple, but he certainly could have entered through the hole as we saw Ben did in Season 5, which is why this one is CV4. Chapter 5, The Tunnels.
Where are we? The tunnels.
The underground part of the island is one of those mysterious aspects that I must say was a bit underexplored on the show. It's also something I will deal with more when we come to Season 5. There's likely a connection between the Cerberus vents and the tunnels, since the smoke monster have traveled underground and uprooted trees in close proximity of the vents. There might be many more than those 4 on the island. But I think it's fitting that most of the Cerberus vents that Dharma knew of were in close proximity of the Swan station. The midsection survivors had much more experience with the monster than the tail section survivors further north. I also think that while they wrote this episode, the tunnels were likely created by Dharma and didn't have this ancient Egyptian design to them. But if we have to work with what we got from this map, with what we got in the later half of the show, then it's likely that the EEP, the Emergency Escape Protocol, involved the tunnels. That is due to this notation up here that confirms the EEP being a subterranean tunnel system. Since the hostiles weren't too keen on Dharma entering their sacred sites, the notations on the Blastor map could have been part of Radzinsky's research of the hostiles. This is the deeper layer of the Blastor map. He already had tons of knowledge of the Dharma initiative, but trying to figure out the tunnels was unexplored territory. The hub that is mentioned here is not far from the barracks. Maybe it's that giant chamber where they stored Jughead. Over here we have this one, known to be a hub for EEP conduits. In the original sketch for the Blastor map, this sentence was paired off with the Orchid station. I can see that being a possibility. When the Dharma initiative came to the island, the well down to the frozen wheel was filled up with sand, unable to reach, but there could have been some secret passageways underground that led to this chamber.
No. On the other side of this column here is a wheel slipped off its axis. All you have to do is give it a little push.
I have drawn some lines from where we have confirmed sites of the tunnels and the Cerberus vents. Up here, with the temple being CV4. Going to the barracks, I am adding one line up here since the map mentions a terminal for the tunnel system.
Is there anything in there about how we're supposed to move a 10-ton bomb across the island?
Actually, it's 20 tons.
From here we can add a longer line down south to some area near the Orchid, some kind of hub in close relation to the frozen chamber. Then through the valley and to the north of the Pearl, the CV1.
Now throw it in.
No! Just do it! Hurry, I can't hold it! Don't do this, Kate! Throw it in! Now! Kate!
Then going down to CV2, which is blocked by the Swan station. Below the Swan, it says that there are no connection to the tunnel system. There are no ways to get into the Swan using the tunnels, as we saw with the Orchid being connected to the frozen chamber or the barracks. Remember, Horace Goodspeed's house was connected through the tunnels. Let's continue. The tunnels would then go to CV3 over here.
It's right outside. What's right outside?
In the second spectrum of the map, it says Convinced Island is Hydra, tunnel blocked, unable to access. Alex confirms in Season 3 that there is no tunnel to the mainland, so does this mean that someone constructed a tunnel going from the mainland to Hydra Island? That is an impressive and extremely expensive engineering feat. This isn't like many other undersea tunnels we have in the world that go underneath a city river used by the vast population in car traffic. This is a few miles of ocean to cross on an island with a small group of people. An undersea tunnel would cost millions of dollars. The distance covered here is the same distance of the Lincoln Tunnel in the US.
To keep the river clear for shipping, it was decided to build a tunnel rather than a bridge.
A project with a total cost of 190 million. I know Dharma had money, but certainly not enough to do this. So I think the mapper, either Radzinsky or Kelvin, meant something else. Likely a naturally formed cave or something, like an underground tunnel, eroded from volcanic activity that went to the underwater part of the station or into the lagoon over here, and at some point there might have been some rocks that blocked it. So yeah, I don't think anyone on the island had the resources or interest to build a tunnel to Hydra. That's my 2 cents on the matter. And now we've completed the analysis of the blast door map. I will likely reference it again later in my videos, and I will also analyze the specific stations much deeper when we get to explore them later in the show. If you want to subscribe or share this with other Lost fans, then please do. This one really took a while to analyze and edit. Well, see you guys in the next episode, which will be a normal exploration video.